They say if you work in tech long enough, you will eventually watch someone break the very thing that keeps the lights on, all in the name of progress. I have been in this game for 15 years, and I have seen plenty of flashy suits walk through those glass doors, tossing around acronyms like candy. But Travis Kellerman? He took it to a new level. My name is Melissa Rayner. I am 37 years old, born and raised in Spokane, Washington, and I work as a senior systems architect at a mid-sized tech firm called Vistatek based in Denver. I have been with this company for 11 years, and until recently, I was invisible by design. I liked it that way. I built the core transaction validator that ran the heart of our operations, and I maintained it silently, efficiently, and completely out of sight. Then Travis arrived, our brand new CFO, former consultant, MBA from somewhere that probably prints degrees on gold foil paper. He walked in with perfectly coiffed hair, a $2,000 watch, and a PowerPoint full of corporate buzzwords. I sat in the back of the all-hands meeting that day, listening as he confidently told the company that we needed to reduce redundancy, streamline cloud operations, and sunset outdated systems. The crowd clapped. I sat frozen, eyes narrowing just slightly. I already knew what was coming. The writing was on the wall, and I had seen that wall too many times. 2 days later, he toured the data center with a small entourage, none of whom had ever written a line of code in their lives. When they reached Rack C3, Travis stopped. He folded his arms, cocked his head, and grinned. "What is this, a nostalgia museum?" he joked, pointing at the row of aging servers I had maintained for nearly a decade. Someone chuckled. I did not. I stepped forward and said calmly, "That rack runs the sync validator for all 5 of our payment systems. It handles timestamp integrity, token cleanup, and session bridging across platforms." Travis turned toward me like I had spoken another language. "Sounds like something we can move to the cloud," he shrugged, already dismissing me. That rack may not have looked fancy, but it was the spine of our transaction infrastructure. It was my build, my code, a deeply customized validator that modern cloud solutions had failed to replace more than once. It was patched, optimized, and refined with years of late-night fixes, undocumented workarounds, and sheer technical stubbornness. Nobody knew it better than me, and nobody, certainly not Travis, understood what would happen if it was pulled. He did not ask me to explain. He did not ask anyone. He just kept repeating the phrase, legacy hardware, like it was a curse word, as if age automatically meant weakness, as if shiny was better. I knew his type. They do not listen. They trim the fat so aggressively they forget the bone holds the body together. He saw the server as a line item on a spreadsheet. I saw it as the heart I had kept beating through a dozen outages, migrations, and upgrades. I wanted to believe maybe someone in leadership would speak up, but no one did. Not even Erica, our CEO. She was brilliant in her own right, but she trusted Travis far too quickly. That night, I stayed late. I ran diagnostics, I checked the logs, I copied key data structures to my backup capsule at home. I did not panic, I did not rage, I just did what I always do. Prepare for the moment someone tries to yank the cord and call it innovation. I even left a few notes in the system logs, quietly flagging what would happen if certain services went dark. They were obscure, coded references that only someone like me would understand. I have learned over the years that you do not always need to scream to be heard. Sometimes you just need the system to speak for itself. Travis walked into a company he barely understood and started swinging an axe like he was trimming dead branches. But what he could not see, and what I did not bother to explain, was that he was holding the axe over the foundation. And once it cracked, there would be no fixing it with a memo. I knew the moment he called my server a museum piece that this would not end in a meeting. It would end in disaster. And for the first time in years, I was not going to stop it. I was going to let it happen, not out of spite, not out of pride, but because sometimes the only way to show people what matters is to let them break it. I knew he would come for it sooner or later. People like Travis always do. They see something old and assume it has no value, like age equals uselessness. It was a Thursday afternoon when he finally made his big tour of the server room. He came in like he owned the place, flanked by 2 junior analysts and one of the facilities guys. Everyone was nodding along as he spouted off about efficiency, budget cuts, and how we were going to modernize our entire stack. That was the moment he stopped in front of rack C3, my rack, the one I had built, protected, and tuned for almost a decade. He folded his arms and smirked like he had just found a fossil. "That is the Smithsonian wing, right?" he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Let's put that relic out of its misery." I felt the heat rise in my chest, but I held it back. No eye roll, no heavy sigh, just steady breath and a firm tone. "That is not a relic. That is the time-sync nucleus for all high-volume transactions across 5 platforms," I told him, calm as ever. He looked at me like I had just handed him a puzzle he did not want to solve. Then he laughed and said, "Then why does it not have a logo?" I wanted to laugh too, not because it was funny, but because of how far off he really was. This man truly believed that if something did not come with a brand name or a subscription fee, it must be worthless. That server was not pretty, I will admit. The front panel had some wear, the label tape had faded, and yes, a little dust had collected around the base. But inside it held the logic that kept our payments flowing. Custom validator scripts, timestamp correction queues, token recycling algorithms. None of it was cloud native. All of it was rock solid. He walked past it like he had already made his decision, pointing toward newer racks filled with cloud-hosted containers and managed services. "This is the future," he said, gesturing like a proud father. "That thing, that is tech debt on life support." I glanced at one of the analysts standing behind him. She gave me an awkward half smile, the kind people give when they know something is wrong but do not want to be involved. I did not blame her. Travis had not even been here a month, and he was already swinging a wrecking ball through anything that did not fit his vision. I tried once more to explain it. "That server is custom-coded. It runs legacy transaction validation that we never fully migrated because no off-the-shelf solution could handle our scale. If you pull it, the payment flow will start to degrade, slowly at first, then catastrophically." He waved me off like I was reading a weather report for a city he had never heard of. "We will move it to AWS and patch the rest. If it is that important, it should have been upgraded by now." I knew then that logic would not work, not with someone like him. Travis was not interested in understanding the system. He was only interested in how it looked on a spreadsheet. He was cutting costs to meet Q4 goals, and Rack C3 was just another box to check. He did not care that the server ran with 99.999% uptime, that it processed microtransactions with near-perfect accuracy, or that I had kept it alive through 3 separate migrations. He only saw wires and an aging chassis. And worse, he saw me as part of the problem, someone stuck in the past, clinging to old tech. After the tour, I stayed behind in the server room for a while. The hum of the machines was familiar, comforting. I ran a quick health check on Rack C3. Everything was green, solid, as always, but I knew it was only a matter of time before someone came in with a shutoff order. I had already started preparing, of course. My backup mirror at home was ready. The override capsule was secure. Still, it stung. Watching someone look at years of your work and treat it like trash. Not because it was broken, but because it was quiet. Unbranded. Dusty. It was not the first time someone underestimated me or the systems I built, but this time felt different. This time, I would not be rushing in to stop the fall. I had warned them. I had documented everything. If Travis wanted to pull the plug, I was going to let him. And when the house of cards came crashing down, I would be right here, watching, waiting, ready to show him just how expensive ignorance can be. It was early Friday morning when I walked into the server room and saw the facilities guys standing by rack C3, holding a piece of paper in one hand and looking uncomfortable. The moment I saw their faces, I knew exactly what it was. One of them handed me the printout without a word. At the top was a forwarded email from Travis Kellerman. Subject line, Asset Decommissioning Schedule. The line that made my stomach twist? Decommission Rack C3, non-essential, begin Monday 8 a.m. Just like that. No meeting, no warning, no questions, just a bullet point on a spreadsheet that sealed the fate of the system I had built and guarded for years. I read it twice. Then I folded the paper, handed it back, and nodded. I did not argue. There was no point. The decision had already been made in some air-conditioned conference room full of people who had never stepped foot in this server bay before. I could see the apology in the eyes of the guys from facilities. They knew what that rack meant. They had seen me pull all-nighters here during outages. They had seen me troubleshoot when nobody else could. But none of that mattered now. Travis had decided it was non-essential, and so on Monday morning it would be shut down. Just like that. I did not storm into his office. I did not fire off a dramatic email. I did not plead or beg. Instead, I did what I always do when something matters. I prepared. That afternoon, I ran another full backup of the validator capsule, compressed the override scripts, encrypted the shell instructions, and uploaded a mirrored version to my offsite home node, something I had maintained quietly for years, just in case. Not because I was paranoid, but because I knew better than to trust people who made decisions based on surface-level assumptions. People like Travis, who thought data was just numbers, not systems. By the time the rest of the office was buzzing with happy hour plans and end-of-week wrap-ups, I was still in the server room. I walked past rack C3 slowly, brushing my fingers along the top panel, feeling the slight hum of the processors beneath the metal. It was still working perfectly. No glitches, no drop transactions, no lag in sync. It was doing exactly what it was designed to do. I remember thinking, let them shut it off. Let them see what happens when they cut the engine and expect the ship to steer itself. I was not angry anymore. Just tired, disappointed maybe, but mostly I felt ready. That night, I sat at my kitchen table in silence, my laptop open, logs scrolling quietly across the screen. The mirror node was stable, fully operational, and ready to observe. I had built it years ago as a personal project, part hobby, part insurance. It was an exact copy of the validator, minus the active data feed. That would go dark when the main system was unplugged, but everything else, the logic, the workflows, the timestamp scripts, were there. I could track what failed, how quickly, and when it did, I would have the evidence. Not for revenge, not even for pride, just to prove that I had not imagined the risk, that I was not just being nostalgic. Monday was coming fast. Everyone else would walk in, sip their coffee, and assume business as usual. Meanwhile, the core infrastructure of our payment pipeline would be slowly bleeding out. It would not crash all at once. It would take time. First a few delays, then strange refund loops, then tokens that expired too early or not at all. Transactions stuck in limbo, metrics skewed across dashboards. A slow-motion disaster nobody would be able to trace, unless they had been watching from the beginning. And I would be. I did not sleep much that weekend. Not because I was anxious. I had already made peace with it. I just wanted to be present, to bear witness. For years, I had been quietly saving this company from chaos, unnoticed and unthanked. Now, I was going to do nothing. I was going to let them unplug the one thing holding everything together, and I was going to let them feel the silence that followed. Not out of cruelty, not even out of resentment, but because sometimes silence is the only teacher people like Travis will listen to. For the past 3 years, I had quietly maintained a full mirror of our validator system from my home office in Chapel Hill. Not out of paranoia or fear, just preparedness. That machine, my sandbox, ran on custom hardware, completely isolated from the internet, air-gapped in a sealed cabinet with double-layer encryption. I built it with Elena, my former coworker and closest friend in the tech team, back when we both still had some faith in upper management. She was 29 when we started the project, sharp as a blade and just as quiet. We called it the Ghost Node. It had no official name, no external ping, no access from the outside. Just a clean environment with one purpose: to quietly reflect everything the live validator did in real time. We kept it simple, elegant, and invisible. Elena helped me design the interface. She wrote most of the isolation shell and helped build the patch loader for hot-swapping new logic when production changed. The Ghost Node sat in my basement, humming away in silence, logging, simulating, and syncing to a fraction of a millisecond. Nothing fancy, nothing flashy, just precision and discipline. It was our insurance policy. Not because we believed the main system would fail, but because we knew the people in charge would. People always assume stability is permanent, especially when they never helped maintain it. When Elena left the company 2 years ago, she handed me a USB key with her final commits and a message scrawled on the label, "For when the suits forget where the wires run." I still have it in my drawer. She had seen it coming just like I did. Not this specific mess, of course, but the shift. The gradual replacement of engineers with efficiency consultants, of architects with strategists, and of understanding with dashboards. That is what happens in places like Vistatek. They grow fast, lose sight of their roots, and start handing over critical systems to people who only know how to read summaries. Knowing this, I did something that still makes me smile to this day. I slipped a small warning into the company's internal documentation, tucked beneath a maintenance appendix for low-level integration patches. I gave it a bland, boring title, Echo Drift Failsafe, and placed it under a subheader that nobody ever opened. Inside, I documented the potential failure path if Rack C3 were ever removed. I laid out what would happen to token loops, timestamp queues, and micro-validation chains. I even attached a reference image, deliberately blurry and outdated, so it would not trigger anyone's curiosity. I signed it off under an old internal alias. It sat there untouched for over a year. I never told anyone about it, not even Elena, because the truth is, nobody reads internal documentation unless something has already gone wrong. That was my plan. Not sabotage, not revenge, just a quiet alarm bell for whoever would be scrambling in the dark later on. I gave them a breadcrumb, and if someone was smart enough to follow it, they would find the exact cause before everything collapsed. But if they ignored it, if they laughed like Travis had, then the fall would be theirs to own, and I would be free of the guilt. Every few weeks, I would test the Ghost Node, just to make sure it still reflected accurately. I had rigged a separate transaction log to mimic test scenarios. Even as new systems came online and other teams replaced or layered tools on top of ours, the core validator never failed. It just kept working, always reliable, always unseen. It made me wonder how many other people had built invisible safety nets like this, and how many were forced to watch while someone else cut the ropes thinking they were useless strings. That weekend, while everyone else was counting down to Monday like it was just another start to a work week, I was running diagnostics, not out of fear, but out of habit. I knew what was coming. I had seen it too many times. Some confident executive decides they understand the machine better than the mechanic. So they pull a plug, delete a line, or reassign a task without asking what it does. They trust the report instead of the person. And by the time they feel the damage, it is already done. So I sat there, monitoring my Ghost Node, watching transaction logic run in clean, perfect silence. I thought of Elena, of the USB drive, of the Echo Drift note buried deep in the archive. And I waited, because when Monday came and that cable was pulled, they would not hear a crash. They would hear nothing, and that silence, that was where the lesson would begin. By Wednesday morning, the cracks were visible to anyone paying attention. Refunds started triggering double debits. Customers who had canceled their orders were charged twice, and a few were charged again days later. Some checkout sessions stalled endlessly during authentication, forcing users to refresh their browsers or abandon their carts altogether. Worst of all, order confirmations were coming through without timestamps. The transaction records looked clean on the surface, but there was no temporal data behind them. No trace of when, where, or how the transaction had been finalized. To a payment gateway, that is like trying to write a check with no date, useless and dangerous. Travis, of course, brushed it off like it was just a bump in the road. I heard him in the morning stand-up, calm as ever, sipping coffee and saying, "We are seeing a minor regression in our migration flow. Standard stuff. The cloud validator will self-correct within the next update cycle." He even smiled when he said it. That forced, corporate smile people wear when they are too arrogant to admit they do not understand what is happening. I could tell some of the junior engineers were nervous, but no one dared challenge him outright. Not after what he did to Phil, the front-end lead who questioned his cost-cutting decisions last quarter. Phil was gone within a week. Back at home, I was watching my ghost node light up like a Christmas tree. Error after error, red flag after red flag. The mirror system was not just simulating traffic anymore. It was actively documenting every discrepancy in real time. Refund loops, token mismatches, queue delays, malformed XML in the back-end pipelines. It was all there, cataloged in clean logs and plotted neatly across dashboards I had built myself. The validator was still running, just not in production, and from where I sat it was screaming for help. What fascinated me the most was how subtle the failure was. It was not a crash. It was not even a bug in the traditional sense. It was a slow drift, a gradual unraveling of logic that only made sense if you understood how time synchronization worked across decentralized systems. Without the timestamp validator in rack C3, everything started to slip. Not immediately, but inevitably. A few milliseconds off here. A delayed token expiration there. Eventually, it stacked up into real loss. Lost trust, lost money, lost control. And Travis? He was too busy measuring server costs to notice his kingdom was starting to rot from the inside. At one point that afternoon, I got a text from Jade, one of the few engineers I still trusted at Vistatek. She was 32, smart and cautious with her words. The message was simple. "Hey, something weird is happening with order processing. You seeing this?" I almost replied, but stopped myself. I knew she would figure it out on her own eventually, and I needed to stay quiet. The moment I said anything, they would mark me as the source of dissent, not the person who had been trying to warn them for months. So I just stared at the message, then placed my phone face down on the desk. That night, I stayed up late watching the logs roll in. Each entry was a quiet confirmation of what I had known all along. The system they had tried to modernize was built on layers they never bothered to understand. And without that one core layer, my layer, it could not hold its shape. I kept imagining Travis in his office, surrounded by dashboards and graphs, convincing himself that everything was just transition turbulence. I wondered how long it would take for the numbers to catch up with the truth. What they were seeing was not a glitch. It was a ghost. A shadow left behind by something they had killed without asking why it existed in the first place. And now it was haunting their perfect little cloud. Not loudly, just enough to keep them guessing. Enough to make their numbers stop adding up and their users start asking questions. I knew the worst was still coming. The meltdown had not hit yet, but the tremors were here. And once they crossed the threshold of denial, they would come looking for answers. I was ready, but I was not going to speak first. Not this time. It was Thursday morning when I saw the first real whistle come through. Danny, our summer intern, was just 21. Bright, observant, maybe too sharp for his own good. He had been with us for barely 2 months, but he had the instincts of a real engineer. No ego, just curiosity. That morning, buried in one of the lower-tier DevOps Slack threads, he posted a message that caught my eye. Has anyone seen this? Getting consistent clock drift collisions in Region C. Validator timestamps are out of order. Might explain refund weirdness. That was it. Just one message. Clean, direct, technical, and dead on target. Clock drift collisions were exactly what I had feared would start showing up once the core timesync validator went offline. Without Rack C3, the fallback mechanisms were relying on uneven cloud signals. Danny had found the thread. He probably did not even know what it meant yet, not fully, but he had stumbled onto the smoking gun. And someone noticed, because 30 minutes after that message, his account vanished. Gone like it had never existed. No farewell message, no Slack ping, no IT notice, just deleted. At first, I thought it was a bug. Maybe permissions had changed, or his intern credentials expired early. But by lunchtime, the word spread in whispers across the teams. Danny had been let go. Quietly, Travis told a few managers he was spreading alarmist narratives and undermining the cloud migration effort. He was supposedly told to focus on documentation, not diagnostics. When he did not listen, they cut him loose. That was the moment it clicked for me. Travis was not just incompetent, he was dangerous. I had worked under all kinds of execs. Some were clueless but harmless. Some were so obsessed with results that they crushed anything they did not understand. But this was different. Travis was willing to erase anyone who got too close to the truth. Not argue with them, not disprove them, just delete them, pretend it never happened. That is not just bad leadership. That is a threat to the integrity of the entire company. Danny's Slack note stayed in my mind like a bell that never stopped ringing. I had taken a screenshot the moment I saw it, more out of habit than anything else. But now, I kept staring at it, thinking of how close he had come. He had no context for the validator design, no idea about the server that had been unplugged. And yet, his eyes caught the right anomaly. That was the brilliance of it. He was untrained but honest, not jaded by the company culture yet. And that is what made him dangerous to someone like Travis. I reached out to Danny later that night, not on company channels. I had an old email he had once sent me asking about legacy system architecture. I wrote, "Hey, saw your Slack post before it disappeared. You were absolutely right. What you found matters. Let me know if you ever want to talk." I did not expect a reply, but I had to say something. He deserved to know that his instincts had been right, even if the company made him feel like they were wrong. The bigger issue, though, was what his discovery confirmed for me. The drift was accelerating. The system was breaking from the inside, and Travis had started covering tracks instead of asking questions. That was the worst sign of all. The failures were no longer technical. They were political. The more the system misbehaved, the more Travis would tighten control, silence dissent, and isolate the people who understood how things really worked. We were not just heading toward collapse. We were heading there blindfolded. I watched the logs that night like a hawk. Errors spiked in Region B, and token delays crept up in Region D. My ghost node mapped every glitch, every inconsistency, and I kept a separate folder now, Danny's folder, where I stored every flagged incident that matched his original clock drift note. I was building a map of the unraveling, quietly, patiently, because I knew the moment was coming when the facade would crack wide open. And when it did, I would be ready. But until then, I waited. Let Travis delete his threads. Let him fire the canaries. Let him try to silence the machine. The truth has a funny way of showing up when people least expect it. And this time, it was showing up in the form of red flags, scattered like breadcrumbs, left by a 21-year-old intern who just wanted to do his job right. By Friday morning, I had seen enough. Transactions were slipping through without timestamps. Customer accounts were freezing mid-checkout. Refunds were being issued multiple times without being logged. Internally, the data systems were out of sync. It was like the network was arguing with itself about what happened, when, and to whom. It was chaos hiding behind shiny dashboards. And Travis? Still smiling, still giving his minor turbulent speech to anyone who questioned him. I realized if I waited for him to admit anything, the company would fall apart first. So I decided it was time to let the legal team know what was really going on. Carefully, quietly. I did not call from my personal phone. I used a burner line, one I kept for emergencies, and this counted. I knew exactly who to contact. Harold Owens, senior counsel in corporate legal, was a 48-year-old stickler for protocol. He had been at Vistatek for nearly 16 years, and while most people saw him as cold and by the book, I saw him as consistent. Harold did not care about ego or titles. He cared about liability. If there was a thread of negligence buried in documentation, he would find it, and he would not rest until it was resolved or someone was removed. I did not give him my name. I did not have to. When he picked up, I simply said, Protocol Drift 7.4 Internal Documentation, page 391 of the Legacy Compliance Index. Scenario C3 shutdown without validator bypass. Timestamp conflicts. Financial exposure estimated at $3.2 million within 5 days. That was it. I hung up. I did not need to explain anything more. I had written that section myself 2 years earlier as part of an internal audit prep. It was buried deep under legacy contingencies. Documentation no one ever read unless a compliance officer flagged it. The page outlined in technical detail exactly what would happen if RAC C3 went offline without a functioning replacement validator node. It predicted token loopbacks, refund duplicates, transaction drift, and eventually full ledger corruption. It had never been triggered until now. 10 minutes later, legal was in triage mode. I watched the company's Slack light up as Harold sent out queries. First to finance, then to infrastructure, then to data ops. No blame, no panic. Just a cold sweep for facts. He was methodical, asking for logs, change records, a timestamp analysis on Region B's token replay data. I knew the language. He was trying to map the damage, how far it had gone, how many systems were affected, and who signed off on the decisions that caused it. That was the part Travis never understood. Legal does not yell. They do not scream. They ask questions with surgical precision, and if the answers are wrong, someone pays for it. I stayed silent. I did not follow up. I did not inject myself into the thread, but I did keep monitoring Harold's ripple effect. By noon, he had pulled in 2 more analysts. By 2 p.m., he asked for the full decommission authorization trail for RAC C3, not just the budget note. The actual signatures and system shutdown logs. That was where things would start to unravel. Because Travis never documented it properly, he treated it like a simple facilities order, a cleanup job. But what he had really done was dismantle a mission-critical validator node without engineering sign-off, and that meant liability. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat in my kitchen with the home server humming quietly under my desk. The mirror node was still tracking everything. Error rates were climbing, refund rejections, token mismatches. The drift was deepening, but I felt something I had not felt in days. Relief, because now the right people were finally looking. And once legal starts digging, they do not stop. They do not care about Travis's resume or his perfect haircut or his big ideas about optimization. They care about risk, about exposure, about who knew what and when they knew it. I checked Danny's message again, his clock drift warning. I added it to a folder I had labeled Chain of Events. It was growing now. The logs, the Slack threads, the refund incidents, and now the legal search pattern. A chain linked step by step, pointing toward the same inevitable conclusion. Travis had pulled the wrong plug, and now he was going to learn what it meant to ignore the foundation of a system he never took the time to understand. The whisper was out. The machine was in motion. All I had to do was let it run. Saturday morning was supposed to be a celebration. Vistatek's summer promo had been hyped for weeks. 5 high-profile influencers were lined up, each with their own exclusive discount codes, custom landing pages, and social media countdowns. The site was loaded with banners. Inventory was stacked. Our systems were set to handle peak traffic across North America, the UK, and Australia. The forecast? Over $8 million in projected revenue within 48 hours. Everyone on the executive team was buzzing, except me. I was at home in sweatpants, coffee in hand, watching my home validator node flash with critical errors. I knew exactly what was coming, but no one else was ready. The first sign of collapse came at 9:12 a.m. Customers started reporting that their carts were being emptied at checkout. At first, support chalked it up to user error. Then entire order queues began stalling. A repeat customer from Texas tweeted, "Why does your site keep resetting my payment info?" That tweet alone hit 10,000 views within the hour. I watched it in real time. My mirror log showed token mismatches and timestamp rejections piling up in the background. The validators in production were failing to confirm orders. Without Rack C3 online, the clock sync protocol was floating, and it was getting worse every second. By noon, one of the influencers, Sierra Vox, a 31-year-old fitness personality with over 4 million followers, went live on TikTok to promote her Flash Fit bundle. She had no idea the system was broken. She showed off the gear, dropped her link, and told her audience to go, now. Within 3 minutes, her chat lit up like a forest fire. "Checkout's broken. Your site's down." I clicked the link and got an error. I felt an awful mix of pity and secondhand embarrassment. She tried to stay calm, refresh her screen, even reload the Vistatek site on her laptop. Nothing worked. The orders would not process. Then she said it, on stream, live to nearly 50,000 viewers. Is this a scam? The clip went viral within the hour. Travis was unreachable. The official promo site had frozen. Refunds from Friday were stuck in an infinite loop, bouncing back unverified. Our sales dashboard, a massive custom build that normally updated every 15 seconds, was completely black. No metrics, no live order count, no revenue readout. It looked like the company had flatlined. I watched our internal Slack channels explode with panicked messages from marketing, customer service, and even a few panicked VPs. Meanwhile, at home, my own dashboard quietly tracked the root cause. It was the same thing I had documented years ago. Without timestamp integrity, the platform was rejecting its own receipts. It could not validate a sale, so it flagged the event as unconfirmed and moved on, empty-handed. By 6:00 p.m., executive leadership finally called an emergency meeting. I was not invited, but I did not need to be. I knew what was being said. I knew Travis would try to blame everything from faulty DNS routing to legacy integration bugs, but there was no escaping the truth. I had written it in black and white years before in the protocol drift memo. If Rack C3 goes offline without validator redundancy, high-volume orders will begin to fail within 5 days. The system had held out for 6, barely. By midnight, the projected losses were sitting at $5.3 million and counting. The promo was dead. Refunds were being issued for orders that had never been processed. One of our top wholesalers called to cancel their upcoming contract due to unresolved transactional risk. Investors were already asking questions. Legal had gone silent. That meant only one thing. They were building a timeline, and at the center of it would be Travis Kellerman, the man who proudly unplugged a rack he never understood. I sat in the dark, watching the collapse from my laptop. It was surreal, not satisfying, not victorious, just surreal. I had spent years keeping this company afloat behind the curtain, patching code, managing sync drift, and maintaining a machine no one respected. And the second someone decided it was unnecessary, the entire system buckled. I never wanted it to fail like this, but they never gave me a choice. Now, there was no hiding the truth. Not from the board, not from legal, not from the world watching the influencer clips go viral on social media. Vistatek had burned $5 million in less than 14 hours, and the fire had started the moment they unplugged Rack C3. The audit began Monday morning. It was supposed to be a quiet internal review, but nothing about it stayed quiet for long. The legal team, led by Harold, our in-house general counsel, came in hot. He had a folder thick with documentation, all chronologically ordered and cross-referenced. Slack receipts, version control comments, server logs, screenshots, email threads, and at the top of the pile, printed in bold, was the kill order Travis had sent to facilities. Decommission Rack C3 non-essential. That one line had started the fire that torched over $5 million in a single weekend. The audit was not just forensic, it was surgical. And Travis was the patient bleeding on the table. I was not there physically, but I was very much present in spirit. Harold opened the meeting with a simple statement. There was no redundancy protocol for Rack C3, no cloud backup, no validation fallback. And yet, this system was handling clock correction for 6 active microservices across 3 continents. That node was not legacy, it was mission critical. The room went silent. One of the senior engineers tried to interrupt, saying something about migration roadmaps. Harold shut him down by pointing to a timestamped JIRA ticket from 2 years ago, written by me, detailing every interdependency the validator supported. None of them had been accounted for in the CFO's Cloudflow cleanup. The truth was brutal, and it only got worse. Travis, who had tried to swagger his way through the initial part of the audit, began to crumble under the weight of facts. His voice went from defensive to sheepish in a matter of minutes. Harold read aloud a message Travis had sent to our infrastructure lead just a week before the outage. Let's clean out the nostalgia junk and push toward full optimization. These ancient racks are eating power and giving nothing back. It would have been laughable if the damage had not been so real. Harold then cross-referenced that statement with screenshots showing transaction delays, timestamp rejections, and refund loops, beginning within 48 hours of Rack C3's shutdown. Cause and effect had never been so clear. Then came the moment that stunned everyone, even Erica, our CEO. Harold opened a document labeled Protocol Drift 7.4. It was a technical memo I had embedded deep within the internal documentation library under a tag no one bothered to read. Echo Drift. The memo outlined a scenario almost identical to what had just occurred. It described validator drift, clock desync, and the cascading failure of microservices relying on asynchronous tokens. The last paragraph read, in plain English, if Rack C3 is taken offline without validated fallback sync, the system will exhibit irreversible transaction confusion within 5 business days. Harold looked up from the document. This was written over 2 years ago. Erica turned to Travis, her face blank. You saw this? Travis mumbled something about how he did not have time to read through technical noise. That was it. I heard later that she stood up, walked out of the room, and did not return until the next day. By then, HR had already prepped a severance file. Travis's exit was not dramatic. No shouting, no protests. Just a stunned man caught in the mess he had caused, watching the final pieces fall into place. That afternoon, I got a call from Erica herself. No assistant, no formal tone, just a tired, humbled voice on the other end of the line. Amanda, she said, I need you to come back. I was not surprised. I had been waiting for this moment, but I did not rush into agreement. I asked for terms, full autonomy over infrastructure, permanent authority to override budget decisions related to system architecture, and Travis, gone for good. She did not hesitate. Done, she said. We need you. The company needs you. And just like that, I returned. Not out of loyalty, not even out of satisfaction. I came back because I had built something real, something that mattered, and I was not going to let incompetence erase it. The ashes were still warm, but from them I could rebuild, this time on my terms. I walked through the doors of Vistatek on Monday morning like I had never left, except this time the silence in the lobby was different. No fake smiles, no morning chit-chat, just quiet stares and nervous glances. People knew what had happened over the weekend. They knew who had saved the company and who had nearly sunk it. Elena met me by the elevator with a half smile and a small silver drive in her hand. She said nothing, just handed it to me like it was sacred. It was the encrypted capsule we had built together, the one containing the override scripts, the clean validator configuration, and the backup logs no one else had bothered to keep. I held it in my hand for a second, then headed straight for the server room. The air was cold, the hum of machines familiar and oddly comforting. Rack C3 stood in its place, powered off, its wires hanging loose like someone had unplugged a beating heart. I crouched down, plugged in the capsule, and flipped the switch. The screen lit up. One green blink, then another, then 6 more. The node reconnected, pinged all 6 microservices, verified timestamp integrity, and pushed a batch correction command to the dashboard layer. Within 10 minutes, real-time metrics began to normalize. The refund queue cleared. Checkout confirmations resumed. Support tickets dropped by 80% in less than an hour. No grand announcements. Just quiet, steady recovery, like a ship righting itself after nearly capsizing. By noon, Travis was gone, not escorted, not humiliated, just removed. One HR rep, one envelope, one final walk out the door. The decision had already been made over the weekend. The audit findings had left no room for negotiation. Erica made the call herself, and from what I heard, it was not up for discussion. Negligent misconduct, they called it. Insubordination via willful technical ignorance. I had never heard that phrase before, but it sounded about right. He had not just made a bad call, he had doubled down on arrogance, ignored every red flag, silenced people who tried to help, and nearly destroyed the system from the inside out. The company had paid the price, and now so did he. After the firestorm settled, Erica called a company-wide meeting. Not in a conference room, not over Zoom. She stood in the break room with a mic surrounded by every department. She thanked the engineering team, acknowledged the chaos, and then turned to me. Amanda Lee, she said, rebuilt our heartbeat. She saw what none of us saw, protected what all of us ignored, and saved us when the rest of us failed to listen. Then she turned to the infrastructure team and added, from this moment forward, any changes to our core systems go through Amanda, no exceptions. It was not applause I heard after that. It was respect. They gave me a new title, Director of Systems Integrity. It came with full decision authority, a new team, and zero oversight from finance. I wrote my own budget, I set my own parameters, and I rewrote our system documentation from scratch. Every single node, every validator, every fallback routine, not just for me, for the company, for the next woman who refuses to be ignored, for the next team who sees what no one else wants to admit. And most importantly, for every mistake we could no longer afford to repeat. And Rack C3, it got something too. A polished steel plaque mounted right above the cooling panel. It read, Heartbeat Node, Do Not Touch, below it, in smaller print, maintained by Amanda Lee, restored June 17, 2025. People stop and look at it now when they pass through the server room, not because they are curious, but because they remember what it almost cost us, what it still protects, and who made sure it came back online when everything else went dark. In the end, I did not need revenge. I just needed to be right and to prove it. And now, no one dares call it a relic, because when the company's future was down to a flickering green light on one forgotten rack, it was not Cloudflow or buzzwords that brought us back. It was one server, one capsule, one woman, and a lesson no one at Vistatek will ever forget.